Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Grant Management Training Webinar for Texas Parks and Wildlife's Community Outdoor Outreach Program, otherwise known as Co-op. Today's webinar will provide you with detailed information, as well as updated policies and procedures needed for all members of your organization to successfully manage both the programmatic and the fiscal requirements of your co-op grant. Before we jump in, let's touch on a bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. All participants will be muted, but you can submit questions live using the question icon in the upper right-hand corner during the presentation, as well as participate in a live Q&A session after today's presentation. Please note, we will not be using the chat, so be sure you are entering questions using the question mark icon. With changing rules within the co-op grant program each year, this webinar is required to ensure all members of your organization have clear expectations and understanding of program policies. Be sure you have individually registered with the email listed in your Argo account, as we do take attendance, and attendance is mandatory. If you have staff who cannot attend today's webinar, please reach out to your grant coordinator to make alternative arrangements to ensure 100% compliance for your grant staff. If you are watching the recording in place of the live webinar today, please email your assigned grant coordinator to confirm this important requirement has been completed. You can also find important handout documents by clicking on the materials icon in the upper right-hand corner. It's in the little paperclip icon. These handout materials include the co-op program guidance manual, approved TPWD relationships document, a PDF of this presentation, as well as any documents that were provided by our fiscal team. All of these resources and a copy of today's presentation will be in the Argo Resources tab within the next few days. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in the resources section of Recreation Grants Online later this week. The co-op program team is made up of just 2 staff. These include myself, Rena Beyer. I'm the co-op grant manager, and the second half of our program team is Jessica Lagallo, the grant coordinator, who you will hear from later in this presentation. Your grant project has been assigned to either Jessica or me as your primary contact for coordination of your grant project. You were notified of who your primary contact is in the welcome email that was sent following your award announcement. You can also reach out directly if you are not sure who your coordinator is. In addition to the program team, you will also be hearing today from our Recreation Grants fiscal team. Technical support today is provided by Blake Powers, whom you will get to know as you need Argo support throughout your project. Co-op support for your project is provided through 3 pillars. We are all here to support your success over the next 18 months. The 3 pillars of support for your project include the co-op program team, which as I mentioned includes Jessica and me, Rena, for issues or concerns about grant program, activities, compliance and performance goals, reporting, or connecting to any other TPWD resources. Those all should come to either myself or to Jessica. Our fiscal team for issues or questions pertaining to receiving your grant funds, reimbursements, submitting receipts, and the related documentation and forms required to allow reimbursement. And our Argo support staff, Blake Powers, who can help with navigating technical issues within the Argo system. Keep these contacts handy throughout the period of your grant to get the targeted support you need. Today's training is divided into 2 parts. The first part focuses on the programmatic aspects of your grant. The second part focuses on the fiscal aspects. The first half of the training will include an overview of the grant agreement to help you better understand your performance goals, what the grant has agreed to fund, your approved budget, grant compliance expectations, and reporting requirements. We'll take a 10-minute break and jump after the first half of the presentation, and then we'll jump into the second half, where our fiscal team will review the fiscal requirements, reimbursement procedures, and documentation policies. Remember that you can ask questions in real time using the Questions tab, and there will be a live Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. To start, congratulations! Co-op is a competitive grant program, and we receive far more applications than we can support each year. Your grant project proposal was scored and awarded based on very specific criteria, which you successfully included in your grant project. Your grant application ranked as one of the most competitive projects aligned with co-op funding priorities. We awarded approximately $1.3 million this cycle to just 19 of the 69 applications that we received. The Grant Review Committee scored and awarded projects that really connected underserved communities with TPWD sites, programs, and staff. It's important to understand that each grant recipient is accountable to deliver what was proposed and scored in your application to ensure fairness to all applicants. It's very important to understand that your organization's grant agreement and approved budget specifically outlines what TPWD is agreeing to fund. As a reminder, the mission of the co-op grant is to provide grant funding to tax-exempt organizations for programs that engages underserved communities in TPWD mission-oriented outdoor recreation, conservation, and environmental education activities, and connects participants to TPWD sites, resources, and programs. It's important that your organization fulfill all elements of your proposed project, including the direct connections of participants to TPWD as outlined in your project application and in your grant agreement. Okay, let's jump into part one, the grant project. This will include the grant agreement, reporting requirements, and grant compliance. The foundation of success for your co-op grant award is understanding your grant agreement. The grant agreement is a legal document. It is a contractual agreement between your organization and TPWD. Your organization is receiving a grant award that is funded by taxpayer dollars, and there are several rules and policies that govern these funds. The grant agreement includes several critical elements that not only specify these rules and policies, but also specifies what exactly is being funded, outlines the performance goals and specific program delivery expectations to ensure accountability, and it includes the approved grant budget, which likely differs somewhat from the budget that was submitted with your application, as we may not have approved all of your items requested, and we likely consolidated some of the items. Regulations and rules, the stuff we all love. If this is your first experience with receiving a government grant, the amount of rules and regulations may surprise you. The co-op grant is a state government grant. It originates from community tax dollars. Program funds for co-op are derived from a portion of the sporting goods sales tax. This includes tax received on camping, hunting, fishing gear, kayaks, etc. Therefore, Texas Parks and Wildlife must follow government regulations when administering grant funds to organizations. These include the Texas Grant Management Standards, TGMS. TGMS is operated by the Texas Comptroller and is a set of financial management procedures and definitions that state agencies must follow when awarding grant dollars. Chapter 24 of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code. Co-op was created in 1996 by the Texas Legislature and was identified in Chapter 24 of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code. Chapter 24 is our guiding statute for the co-op grant. It dictates the program's purpose and intent. Luckily, you won't need to memorize all the specifics of these regulations and rules. While we have included them as part of your grant agreement for reference, and they are binding, we try to ensure the applicable rules and regulations are included in the co-op program guidance manual document. This document is probably familiar to you by now, since you relied heavily on it while writing your application. The Program Guidance Manual outlines the expectations and requirements specific to applying for and managing a co-op grant. Much of the materials covered today are found in this document. And lastly, the assurance of state-funded awards. This is also an attachment to your grant agreement. This document requires you to read it and sign it as part of your grant agreement. We'll talk more about signing in an upcoming slide. This is what your grant agreement looks like in Argo. Again, this is a legally binding document that outlines the project's scope and requirements, which provides clarification for both your organization and TPWD and the specifics of the project. At the top, you'll find basic information of the grant, such as the project number, name, period of performance, and grant amount. Section 1 is the primary scope of work description for the project, as well as the performance goals used to determine the tangible deliveries met throughout the grant period. Some performance goals have been revised to incorporate all elements of what was proposed in your grant application, but may not have been clear or fully reflected in the original performance goals as written in your application. If this was the case for your organization's contact would have received an email and would have confirmed acceptance of these revisions. Please review these carefully in your grant agreement to fully understand what activities must be completed during the grant period in order to be in compliance of the grant agreement. We take these very seriously because co-op grants are very competitive, and points were awarded to your organization's grant application based on exactly what your organization included in the grant application as reflected in this agreement. If these items had not been in your application may not have scored as well, thus may not have been funded. Therefore, we strive to hold organizations accountable to exactly what is included in their performance goals and participant information as written in the grant agreement and in the application that was submitted. You will be required to submit quarterly reports to document progress on each performance goal, as well as participant demographics. If your organization does not complete the project as proposed, you may not meet the terms of the grant agreement. If it's a small change, such as visiting a different state park than outlined, it won't be a problem. But if your primary aspect of the scope are unmet, you may be considered non-compliant. Your co-op program contact, which is either Jessica or me, is here to answer any related questions throughout your project. Please communicate any challenges early, and we will do our best to assist in finding a resolution. Now let's take a closer look at some of the elements of your agreement. The period of performance outlines when all eligible grant activities must take place. It's important to note that all purchases and all activities must fall within this range. If activities or purchases took place before or after the period of performance, these expenses cannot be reimbursed, nor can activities conducted outside of the period of performance be considered towards meeting performance goals. All equipment and supply purchases must be made and used by participants prior to the last delivered program during your grant period of performance. End of grant purchases are not allowed. I'm just going to read that again because it's an important thing to understand, that all equipment and supplies purchases must be made and used by participants prior to the last delivered program during your grant period. So we will, even if you have funds left over, you can't stock up on your equipment for the future if you've completed your delivered programs. Your co-op grant started on March 1st. Each co-op grant has a period of performance that runs 18 months. So this one would be from March 1st, 2026 to September 1st, 2027. You can begin all approved elements and can incur approved expenses of your grant beginning on March 1st, but you will need to wait to submit a reimbursement until your official grant agreement is executed, meaning it has been issued by TPWD, which will occur through Argo, and signed by both TPWD and your organization. For most of you, these are in process if you have uploaded the requested information and documents into Argo, such as the AP 152 and direct deposit forms. The Performance goals will be listed in your quarterly reports as well as in your grant agreement, where you will describe specific progress throughout the grant based on these goals. Performance goals were taken directly from your submitted application, unless we worked with you to revise the goals to include missing elements that were not originally reflected. While this section is a summary of your scope of work, keep in mind the proposed application that you submitted is referenced in the agreement, and you are expected to implement the project as proposed in the application. Failure to meet your performance goals as written in the grant agreement and as described in the application that your organization submitted may result in noncompliance and may, at a minimum, affect your organization's ability to receive a grant in the future. Your grant agreement also lists the proposed number of unduplicated participants to be served upon completion of the project. The number of unduplicated participants served and their related demographics are derived directly from the submitted application. Unduplicated participants is the actual number of individual participants served, meaning if participants attend multiple events, they are only counted once as unduplicated. Your grant agreement contains many important documents as attachments. Attachments include your approved grant award budget, the TPWD Proud Partner Logo Use Agreement, the Co-op Program Guidance Manual, assurance for state-funded awards, Texas Grant Management Standards, and the Grant Monitoring Plan for your organization. Note that along with the grant agreement, the logo use agreement and the assurance for state-funded awards need signatures. You'll need to sign each of these, combine them into one PDF, then upload them. And this is also noted when you are ready to sign, so you'll be able to see those instructions again. Let's take a closer look at the attachment entitled Approved Grant Budget. Review the approved budget, not what was submitted with your application. Review the approved budget, understand what is allowable for each line item. Consult the co-op program guidance for deeper details of eligible items. Note major rule changes, personnel and food, which I'll speak in more detail about in the following slide. Also note the end of grant purchase. Note that the end of grant purchases are not allowed, as I mentioned before. Budget revisions are rare and require a formal request in Argo and would need strong justification. We'll also note that some lines have been consolidated in your budget. Ineligible items have been taken out. And again, revisions should be considered a rare occurrence. I want to highlight some of the most important parts of the budget. One is personnel. The personnel section has the least flexibility. It has and the reason for that is it has the highest potential for audit on both your side and ours. Note that when you submit your application, we ask for an hourly rate and a number of hours, and you will be held to that. FICA can only be reimbursed at 7.65% and is only if it was included in your original budget. No other fringe benefits are allowed. Be sure to understand if your budget has FICA included, so take a look at that. And again, if it wasn't submitted as part of your application, it won't be in your approved budget. I also want to talk about food. Oh, I just want to mention we're noticing that we haven't been receiving any questions, so please note the question mark. If you have questions, please feel free to include a question there, and we will answer that in real time.
Yeah, we're not using the chat feature or the raising of hands feature because everyone's mics are muted.
Okay, so food. We are also a little careful about food. Expenses related to participant food limited is limited to groceries only. Items like box lunches, school cafeteria meals, or other options must be discussed and pre-approved by your grant coordinator in advance of the purchase and must include a strong justification. We really are trying to get back to the roots of the co-op, which is to get people outdoors. So that's why we are wanting to limit our resources to that intent. I also want to talk about lodging. Lodging should follow exactly what is in your approved budget. If your budget indicates staying at a state park and reimbursement is submitted for a private campground, it may not be and likely would not be reimbursed because we value that relationship with TPWD, and this would have been a consideration for the review committee when they scored your organization's application. Any deviations from your approved budget in this or any other category should be pre-approved by your grant coordinator and may require a budget amendment if approved. Supplies and equipment. Notice detailed line items for some items were consolidated. These are likely for things like fishing supplies, camping supplies, etc. We do this because it gives you more flexibility for these items. So rather than to ask us for a budget revision to buy one additional fishing rod and one less tackle box, etc., by combining these, consolidating these, it allows a little more flexibility. But be sure and ask your grant coordinator if you're not sure a purchase is covered under the consolidated line item. Oops. One second here. And I'll just say again that communication with your grant coordinator is key throughout your project. It'll alleviate a lot of trouble on your end and ours, and that's exactly what we're here for, is to help you through this. So please feel free to send us emails or give us a call if you have questions along the way. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, who's going to be talking to you about grant reporting.
Hello, everyone. This is Jessica Lagallo, and I'm a grant coordinator with the Co-op Grant Program. Today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to ensure you manage your grant reporting responsibilities successfully and stay in compliance with grant expectations. For those of you who have had a grant with us before, this may be a little bit different, and so I want to make sure that quarterly reporting, the format of quarterly reporting, and then the final report are all explained to you in good detail. So let's start by learning about grant reporting. The Co-op Grant Program requires grantees to submit both quarterly reports and a final report. And so we're going to go through both the format of these, the deadlines, the content requirements for each type of these reports. So with quarterly reporting for the 26-27 grant cycle, you'll submit 5 quarterly reports over the 18-month performance period. The very first report that each of you will have due is on July 30th. This report will cover all grant-funded programming during March, April, May, and June of this year. The quarterly report template will be available in your Argo account on the first of the month of the due date. So for example, your first quarterly report will be due July 30th, and Argo will auto-populate that template on July 1st. So if you try to go in and access your first quarterly report in June, it would not be there because it will auto-populate July 1st. Remember that late or incomplete reports may incur compliance deductions. Reports must be submitted even if you have not delivered programs that quarter. So for a few of you out there, perhaps your programs don't start until the new school year, and you may not have any programs in March, April, May, or June. However, you still must file a quarterly report. So even if you have not delivered grant-funded programs that quarter, you still must submit a quarterly report. All quarterly reports are completed and submitted in the Argo system, and they should include the status of each program performance goal in the required format. You will label each goal completed, in progress, or hopefully not, incomplete. This will include the actual number of unduplicated participants and underserved demographics for each participant served. You'll also report the Texas Parks and Wildlife relationship element completed each quarter, and we will monitor the timeline and progress each quarter by your grant coordinator. So we talked about the format. Let's take a closer look at the required format of the quarterly report, as this may be a little different, especially for returning grantees. It's very important to follow the requested format, and reports that are not submitted this way may be sent back to the grantee. The project's performance goals will auto-populate in the quarterly report template. The required format for quarterly reporting is to report the status of each numbered performance goal as complete, in progress, or incomplete. Let's take a look at a few examples here. In the first example, you'll see Goal 1. This goal was for state park field trips during the project. Coordinate and deliver 6 4-hour field trips for 60 unduplicated participants. That includes kayaking, fishing, and hiking. Each trip will include a guided program with a TPWD park ranger. So that is performance goal number 1 for this sample. And for your quarterly report, you're going to be telling us, is this in progress? Has it been completed? Or, we hope not, is it incomplete? On your quarterly report, the format will include a narrative underneath that details the status and progress of that goal. For example, this goal is in process. They have completed 2 of the 6 state park field trips. They've gone on to explain how many participants attended, what they did during the trip, and the TPWD relationship that was used. Also in the quarterly report, there will be a table that will be filled out that includes future activities for the upcoming quarter that will need to be entered. This is a great way for grant staff to anticipate planning of possible upcoming site visits. Please do not report any activities outside of the agreed upon grant-funded programs. So if your group also took a field trip to a museum, that was not part of your grant agreement, and we cannot have that in your grant report. Your quarterly report will only contain the agreed upon grant-funded programs. You'll also have an opportunity to upload photos, to share, and a space in your quarterly report to communicate any issues or questions with your grant coordinator, or if you need help with your grant. Your quarterly report will also require demographic data for each program participant served. Each quarter will require entering the actual number of unduplicated participants to date. The total unduplicated number and proposed underserved demographics of participants is taken directly from what you submitted on your application to the co-op grant program. So again, this is from the grant application that you submitted. The total unduplicated number is cumulative each quarter. Enter the actual number of participants to date for each row. The percentage in the right column will auto calculate for you and will help you see if you're on track. Projects receive significant scoring during the competitive review process for this information, and reported documents need to be in compliance with this requirement. So if you, in your application, if you told us you were going to serve 80% minority participants, then we're going to hold you to that. Same if the unduplicated number overall. So in this instance, you can see they propose to serve 425 actual participants. One last note, it's very important that your final report at the end is aligned with the data and the program dates that you submit in each of your quarterly reports. So as you're reporting all of this information each quarter, it should, in theory, help you complete your final report at the end. If we were to take each quarterly report and add the numbers up, that is what should be in your final report. State funds are monitored and audited closely, so be sure to take the time needed for accurate reporting to avoid some headaches later. The final report template will be activated in August of 2027. If you finished programming and would like access sooner to close out your grant and complete your final report, please reach out to your grant coordinator. This report is a summative report to assess compliance of all expected elements of the grant agreement. It's very important that your final report and all the associated program dates and participant data aligns with all previously submitted quarterly reports. In essence, it's the compilation of all your quarterly reports. The final report will include the final status of all performance goals. Ideally, all of these are labeled completed. A description of all completed Texas Parks and Wildlife relationship elements, the final number of unduplicated participants, the final demographic data, and a list of all grant-funded programs delivered. This should be by date, location, and activity. And again, this should align with the dates and programs submitted in prior reports. Take note that the list of grant-funded programs and dates can also be used by our staff during the audit process for reimbursements to match expenses with associated program dates. So if your last program date is July of 2027 and you're submitting a receipt for reimbursement that was purchased on August 15th, we would have a lot of questions come up if your last program happened in July. So it is very important to watch those dates, to match expenses, to match the program dates and what's reported in the goals. So this wraps up our training on grant reporting. The next element that we're going to cover, and the final element for a successful co-op grant project, is ensuring delivery of the Texas Parks and Wildlife relationships. The co-op grant seeks to connect underserved audiences to our sites, our programs, and our resources, as proposed in your application. It's important to fulfill all elements of your proposed projects, and our program greatly values the direct connections of participants engaged with Texas Parks and Wildlife. Plan to plan early. The capacity of Texas state parks and sites are based on visitor safety and resources, and many of our parks reach capacity for day passes as well. That surprises people. Just to visit a state park during the day, it's important that you get those day passes early. Failure to plan is really planning to fail. So for example, if your program includes an overnight group campout at a popular state park like Garner State Park, Let's say you try and reserve a campsite about a month beforehand and they're all booked up. That is not planning ahead to fulfill your grant requirements. Sites can be reserved up to 5 months or more in advance, and we rarely make exceptions for reports of, well, the park was all booked up. We do allow substituting another state park, but we would not allow going to a local city park or camping in a schoolyard instead of taking participants to the state park and completing the campout as proposed. We do understand that weather can impact outdoor programs, and as requested in your application, it's very important to have alternate plans and reschedule dates. I did want to share that online booking is available or by phone, but note that group campsites and lodges and shelters and facilities cannot be booked online. We do have a specialized phone line available just for group reservations, and this can be found on our website and also here on this slide. I can't stress enough about calling group reservations. The number here is on your screen. They can often let you know what parks have openings at certain times of year. They can also help you if one park is full. They can help you determine what parks might have sites or group facilities available during the time period that you need. So really take advantage of that group reservation line. If your performance goals include training for your staff, it's important to ensure this takes place as soon as possible, especially prior to program implementation or at least the first half of your grant. For Texas Parks and Wildlife training, such as angler or archery instructor training, Project Wild training, or aquatic science or iNaturalist training, any private trainings at your site that were incorporated into your project, now is the time you need to reach out to those Texas Parks and Wildlife staff to start those conversations and logistics, even if they're months away. Use the contact information provided in the required Texas Parks and Wildlife commitment letter that was submitted with your application. Or for public events in your region, you can go on the Texas Parks and Wildlife event calendar on our website to get registered now. Availability is limited and they can be booked up months ahead of time. This also applies to Texas Parks and Wildlife staff visits that were proposed as part of your project, like if a game warden was going to come visit you, or in your project, an urban biologist was coming to work with your participants, or park staff were going to deliver programs for your group. It's your responsibility as a grantee to initiate that contact now and secure dates to ensure these elements of your project will be completed. If you need assistance or you're not sure who your contact is for many of these training or staff partnerships, please reach out to your grant coordinator and we can help you get connected. Outreach programs. If you've incorporated outreach programs, the most common one is our Texas Outdoor Family Camping Program. It's important to begin activating those partnerships and begin communicating with the regional TOF staff now. Reservations for Texas Outdoor Family Programs right now in the spring opened up on February 1st for spring campouts. They'll open again on July 1st for fall campouts. These programs have very limited availability and they are first come, first served by date and location. You'll also need to ensure you register for and complete the TOF Partnership Outdoor Leadership Training to fulfill the obligations of your partnership. And these are usually just twice per year per region. So make sure you're talking to your outreach and TOF staff. Again, planning early is planning to succeed. I want to stress that co-op grant recipients are not entitled to special entry or reservation privileges at TPWD facilities or sites. Please support the reputation of our program and your organization. And do not just show up at a park or TPWD facility or demand a private tour or notify park staff the day of your visit that your group of 100 high school kids is supposed to do a service project because you have a co-op grant. Please don't expect the busy park superintendent to talk to your group about conservation careers on a very busy holiday weekend. Yes, all of these things happen several times a year. It is the grantee's responsibility to schedule and reschedule any required TPWD programs, trainings, campouts, day trips, and coordinate with TPWD staff as described in your project application and in your performance goals. Communication is really key. We often hear from park staff that talking to your group, meeting your participants, hosting your service project absolutely makes their day. But prior communication and making sure proper planning is in place is very important to park staff to ensure a successful experience for everyone and your participants. It's the grantee's responsibility to schedule and reschedule any required Texas Parks and Wildlife programs with state parks and coordinate with the staff. Working in the field of outdoor education, we all know that weather happens. You can count on at least one canceled event. Heat, winds, flooding, I guarantee you it will happen. Weather cancellations happen, a plan B is needed. Be prepared to build backup dates into your project. Do that now at the beginning of your grant to ensure that all elements can be completed. If you need an alternative site or program, let's say a park interpreter or volunteer coordinator calls you to cancel your service project happening, we can help you try and get that rescheduled. It might be at a different park, it might be a little bit different project, or there might need to be some flexibility on either side. Just reach out to your grant coordinator for recommendations and let's try and find a solution together. So a couple of final words about grant compliance. We know how excited you are that you won the grant. The information that you include in your reports will be compared to your grant agreement and the project details included in the grant application that your organization submitted. We want you to be successful, and through this process, we determine if all requirements have been met. The grant agreement, it's a binding document that reflects the partnership between your organization and Texas Parks and Wildlife. Make sure you understand it. It clearly outlines the goals and activities your organization has agreed to complete through receiving your co-op grant funding. Your organization is eligible to reapply for these grants every 2 years as long as no extension was received. This is to ensure that your organization will not have multiple co-op grants at the same time. If grant requirements were not met, grant staff will notify you during the closeout process. We may place a scoring deduction when applying for future co-op grants. These scoring deductions ensure fairness and accountability, as this is a competitive grant program paid with state tax dollars. Some of the factors that may trigger a deduction would be things like not spending all of your grant funds. If you leave a little money at the end of your project, that's really not a problem, but a substantial amount can result in point deductions. Co-op does not get this funding back. So if you have a $100,000 grant, let's say you only spent $60,000 and there's $40,000 left on the table. We're unable to give that to another organization. We do not get that funding back, and substantial unspent dollars reflects poorly on all of us. So we do encourage you to spend all grant dollars. Unfulfilled project elements or grant agreement requirements, such as not serving specific participant demographics outlined in your grant application, or not completing your project goals as outlined in your grant agreement, can also trigger a deduction. Not fulfilling the proposed Texas Parks and Wildlife relationship requirements can also trigger a deduction. These are very important to the grant mission and connecting underserved audiences to Texas Parks and Wildlife. So again, plan early for these elements. We know our facilities and staff can be very busy, and it's important to put these logistics in place now. If the sponsor is unresponsive to our requests for information, if we are trying to reach you by email, by phone, or if our fiscal team is trying to email, call, or reach you by phone, it's important to respond in a timely manner. If you're unresponsive to our request for information, this can also trigger future deductions. And finally, if reports are consistently missing, late, or incomplete, that can also be a compliance issue and trigger deductions. So before we wrap up part one, the grant program side of this training, I want to let you know you don't have to remember everything. Think of Argo as your 24/7 self-serve resource. The resources tab in the Argo system provides step-by-step tutorials, videos, and PDFs. These are all available during your grant journey. This includes the important step of how to sign and upload your grant agreement. You can see that's highlighted in yellow at the bottom. There's a short video that can walk you through that. How to complete quarterly reports, how to submit an amendment. These important resources are always here for you to help you navigate managing your new grant. So this concludes the grant program training on the programmatic elements of your grant award. Up next will be part 2, fiscal management of your grant award with our audit team. Please ensure that your primary fiscal contact is ready for part 2. The audit team will review reimbursements, documentation needed for receiving your grant funds, and then of course, at the end of today's training, we will also open it up for a live question and answer at the end of today's webinar. So be sure and submit your questions either in the question icon or at the end during the live Q&A. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Right now, it's 1:52 p.m. We will come back on with part 2 at 2:02 p.m. and we will see you then. Thank you.
Howdy, y'all, and welcome back. I'm Brian Lofgren. I'm the fiscal manager, and I'm going to be introducing you to part 2, the fiscal section. I'm going to do 2 things, introduce our audit staff, and then just underscore a few points that I want you to be listening for in their presentation. First, our fiscal staff. The auditors are Daryl Edgar, Michael Sanford, Mario Castellanos, and Adam Padilla. Marcy Cavazos Colunga is our audit team lead. I know these folks have auditor in their title, but they are not scary folks. In fact, they're here to help your organization be successful and to capture all of the documentation. They can't do it for you. There is a limit to how much they can do. It has to be your work and your submission. But I'm constantly impressed with this team and how well they reach out and coach and help recipients through. We're going to be talking about a term, RFP, request for payments. This is how your organization gets its money. We are not making RFPs required quarterly or monthly, but they really need to be periodic. Recipients are so much more likely to have problems when they wait till the end to do their first RFP. If you're not actually the one entering RFPs, requests for payments, into the Rec Grants online system, please pass this information on to the person who is. Whether it's someone in your organization's accounting or grants team, or it's someone on your board or a volunteer. This presentation is being recorded. Argo Resource Tabs has links to guidance, documents, and short targeted videos. Have the person who is actually entering RFPs into Argo contact us early if they have any questions. I would really suggest trying to do even a small RFP early on so that you know the process. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mario and our audit team to present a little more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mario Castellanos. I'm one of the TPWD fiscal auditors here at Recreational Grants. Just going to touch base. This is kind of what we're going to be covering. So this is going to be kind of the grant payment reimbursement overview. We're going to be touching up on, payment requests, how to submit a payment request, documents required, frequency, final payment, and at the end, questions and answers. So for the grant payments, for the reimbursements, it's really items and services will be purchased first, and then TPWD pays after documentation are received and approved. Like I mentioned before, grantees are encouraged to submit at least one payment request per quarter. You may submit a reimbursement request as necessary. However, there's only one active payment request is allowed at a time due to system limitations. Some grantees may submit monthly payment requests for a prior month's grant expenditures. we're gonna be covering kind of the payment through, recreational grants online, how to request a payment. And, Blake will cover that, and then I'll kind of go, touch base a little bit on the expectations of how it should look and be presented.
Hey, everybody. My name is Blake Powers. I'm the systems analyst for the Recreation Grants Online system. And many of you have heard my voice before and probably spoken to me on the phone. During the application process, I build a lot of different resource videos that we can use for everything from submitting the applications to submitting quarterly reports, signing your grant agreements. I create all those resources. So primarily, what I'm here to do is to help your technical process along as you go through your co-op grant. Okay, so today what we're going to look at is what will happen after you get an email from the system. You've signed your grant agreement, you've returned it. This is going to be in a couple of months, probably for some of you. But you then get an email from the system saying, hey, your project's active, you can go in and request reimbursements. All right, we're picking up from that point, okay, because you will not be able to request a reimbursement until we have a signed, executed grant agreement that's been entered into the TPWD financial system that has then dispatched you so that we can pay you if you do ask for money. Okay, so at that point, I want to make a couple of really quick walkthrough points for you all and make sure that everybody can see what is going on in Argo when this happens. Okay, and the main difference is I'm going to go ahead and log in as my test sponsor. Okay, up to this point in the system, many of you are probably used to accessing your project out here in the My Tasks area. That's because when you applied for a grant, you had a task to create and submit your application. If you were asked questions during the scoring process, you would have had a task to provide the answers to those questions. Once your project was awarded, you would have a task to upload fiscal documentation and co-op project contact documentation. And then eventually you're going to have a task to sign your grant agreement. But after that, you're not necessarily just going to find the project in your task list, because once it goes to active, there isn't by default anything to do right away. Nothing you have to complete immediately. Okay, so this is how to find your project when it's not in a status that's going to put it in the tasks list. Okay, when you log on to Argo, all right, you're going to have this applications tab. That's where you're going to click. All right, this is going to take you back to your project. All right. But the key is this tab usually has some names or characters on it. My suggestion is clear those out, okay? Now, if you clear those out and click search, what you're gonna see is every project that you're joined to, okay? Most of you, there aren't enough of them for that to be confusing, so you can simply follow that instruction. You can log in here, clear the search criteria, and then click search and easily find your project. But you'll see my test sponsor here, the good old city of Arlen, has received quite a few grants from our agency because they're our test subject. So I'm going to put in this year, right? Now, if you are an organization that's got lots of co-op grants, the most you should put in here is the year, which is 2026. When I do that, now I'm going to see only the grant projects that were in 2026 for me. And here is my City of Arlen co-op grant, okay? When I click this link in the name column, it's going to take me to what's called the forms menu. I know it's the forms menu because it says forms and there's a list of all the forms I signed during my application, right? When I get my grant agreement ready, it's going to contain the place I uploaded my grant agreement. And as I go through the project, it's got my project elements where I've uploaded my financial documentation and where I would request an amendment down the road, okay? But for now, I've accessed the forms menu, and to generate a new reimbursement request, I'm going to highlight the related documents and messages tab, and I'm going to click initiate a payment/reimbursement request. Okay. Now what that's going to do is it's going to create a unique standalone document that starts with RFP. That means request for payment. All right. This is by itself, and this document will then be in your My Tasks list. Okay, because you've created something for yourself to do, right? And here it is, RFP Co-op 2026, Arlen 0002. So that is how you create a payment reimbursement request. At this point, I'm going to hand it back to Mario, and he's going to overview the form for you and kind of let you know some of, orient you towards some of the areas in the form. Okay.
So this is what the RFP screen should look like. The fields are gray, you don't need to fill out, but here, obviously, drop down and select, the first contact name. And here down at the bottom in the, where it starts seeing green, these are really the stuff that we're gonna focus on today. But so every one of these line items here are gonna be required fields to be filled out. For example, where it says item description activity line item, that should be something that ties it back to your approved budget line item description. And then you can also provide additional details, like if it's, what was purchased, like what kind of supplies, stuff like that. The activity date, obviously, when the activity took place. Vendor, it could be, the name of the vendor, like Walmart, Academy, stuff like that. Invoice date should tie back, to the invoice or receipt number. I'm sorry, the invoice date should tie back to the invoice or the receipt or some kind of proof of purchase. The invoice reference number on here, we're really trying to tie, we need an identifier here to tie it back to the actual invoice or receipt. Some people use the invoice number here, receipt numbers. Sometimes people use approval numbers or reference numbers from the invoice receipts. On the payment type, you can just select what kind of payment, if it was a check or an EFT. On the payment reference number, this is really needs to tie back to the proof of payment. For example, like if you had a check, obviously you would want to put, what check number it was. If it was an EFT, you can use the EFT number. Some grantees use, the last digits of a credit card number, the last 4 digits or so. On the cost category, that needs to tie back to your approved budget, whether it was like the fees related or personal and fringe, supplies. And then obviously you're going to be putting the requested amount, which shouldn't include, stuff like sales tax, gratuity, stuff like that. And up here on the service period, that's really the activities that took place on the reimbursement details that you're requesting. Like, for example, if it's a monthly reimbursement request, you would obviously put, the starting and then the ending of the month. And down at the bottom here is where you would, upload your scanned PDF documents that has, your purchases and then the proof of payment, stuff like that. You would upload it and then save. And I just want to kind of mention that as you're, filling out your reimbursement details, activity line items, make sure you save periodically because the system does time out. So save your work as you go. And, after we get the request for review, if we request additional documentation, like for example, it's missing proof of payment, stuff like that, you can upload additional documents down here as well. And then, put the item description and save, and then, status changes back to us for review. So that covers the reimbursement details. Just keep in mind that, these detailed reimbursements have to be within your period of performance as well. This slide we just covered. We covered filling out an RFP. Now we're going to cover payment documentation checklist. Just make sure that whenever you include in your RFP, it includes, receipts, invoices, or TPWD work records. Submit your proof of payment, which can be, the bank statement, credit card statement, stuff like that. We'll cover that in future slide. Also refer to your approved budget to see what was allowed and allocated. You also want to reference, your co-op guidance. And then we also have our fiscal payment program guide that provides, more specific supporting documentation of what's required for like proof of payment of that such. Receipts, what we're looking for here, it's going to be some of the information that's required, the date, vendor name, address, phone number, items purchased, amounts paid. The receipts do need to be, legible and itemized. Obviously sales tax is disallowed and must occur during the grant period and must also be approved in your budget. For personal expenditures, we're going to be talking about staff, employees. These are types of personal expenditures. You have staff, employees, stipends, and independent contractor, which are not identified as not staff. But all these must be in your approved budget. So this is the TPWD weekly work record that's required for staff employee. We'll cover some of the stuff that is required. Obviously you want to go the period, identify the period, the grantee, the project. We're looking here for like employee names, hours worked, total hours, and then the hourly rates that were allocated in your approved budget. And then the total amount. And it's also very important to write a description of what grant related activity occurred for these expenses. And we want to have these work documents certified by a project officer or supervisor. And I just want to emphasize that, FICA, if we'll pay FICA if it was allocated in your approved budget, but anything outside of FICA will be disallowed. And the FICA rate is 7.65%. And then you can find the weekly work record in the Argo under the fiscal resources section. And just make sure that you select the 2025 or later version. Stipends is going to be kind of similar to the weekly work records. We need we need to see who was paid, the dates, the ranges, the stipend amount. Some people do sometimes provide additional breakdown of how they arrived at that total stipend award, and a description of the grant related activity performed to earn the stipend. Similar to the weekly work record, it needs to be certified, signed, dated, and the stipends per your approved budget will only be allowed. Similar to the weekly work record, this is also found in your sections, the resource section in Argo, under the financial section. And the proof of payment is required as well. Sometimes we see a check or like a pay stub of that such. And that concludes my presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Daryl Edgar. He's also a fiscal auditor. He's going to cover the second half of our fiscal presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Hi, everyone. This is Daryl with the fiscal team. Some of y'all might have talked to me, and it's a privilege to get to know you. I'm going to go through a second half of the fiscal presentation. After going through some of the fiscal resources, we're going to start looking at some specific, maybe supplemental invoices, mileage, that sort of thing, to tie back to your reimbursement for RFP. This right here is a sample contractor invoice. The invoice has the description of the work performed, the base rate. It has a bill to address, the name of the person performing the work, a subtotal, and of course you would be submitting a proof of payment for this invoice as well. The invoices that we receive must include an amount, the date of service, a description of services related to the grant program, and please refer to the approved budget for these invoices. The next thing I will speak on is program food. Food must be for the actual event. The approved budget has allowable food, and these would be grocery store purchases. A caveat would be disallowed food. That would be any restaurants, gas stations, and then see your co-op program guidance for a complete list. And any receipt containing alcoholic purchases will be entirely disallowed. That would be the entire receipt. Food other than groceries would require a pre-approval from your co-op program staff. That would be Rena and Jessica before it is purchased. Approval must be included with your documentation for payment. We really request this when you submit your RFP so that it will speed up your reimbursement process. And typically we look at about a 30-day turnaround. And when you submit this documentation the first time, it'll make it much easier for us to get this stuff approved. And of course, any additional information will slow it up. Proof of payment. A check can be a digital cleared check copy from the bank showing the amount paid, and any copy of non-canceled check with grantee organization bank statement showing check cleared account. If you use a procurement card, a debit, or a credit card, the organization credit statement showing the charges from the credit card company. It's not typical we see, but petty cash and or gift cards. Itemization for cash being withdrawn from petty cash. Copy of digital check, copy showing the petty cash fund was replenished, and any donated gift cards to staff or participants are not eligible. Paying with personal funds. Please reimburse the staff before requesting payment from Texas Parks and Wildlife. The documentation required would be a copy of the receipt or invoice that is submitted to your organization for personal reimbursement, and proof of payment from organization to the staff for the expenditures. Travel and lodging. The receipts for travel and lodging, please include the date of stay, the nightly rate, the number of rooms each night, the hotel information, and these receipts for travel and lodging will show a zero balance. Hotels require prior approval. hotel state tax and local tax is allowable. That is different from the disallowed state sales tax. So on the hotel receipt, typically you will see a hotel state tax and a local tax. That is allowable. Proof of payment is required. Travel, gas receipts or mileage are allowable, but they may not be used simultaneously. The mileage log would have the name of the person, date of activity, total miles claimed per trip, and total amount claimed. Starting and end points with Google Maps. Grant related activities such as camping trips or picking up supplies. If you claim mileage, it would be the current IRS rate used. Commuting mileage to and from work is not allowed. Here is a mileage log example. All the columns are filled out. The date is required, the departing facility and address, and the destination facility and address. And then this will tie back to the grant activity goal. The trip miles that are shown will tie to the mileage map example. So this is an example of the Google Maps showing the mileage that you travel for your grant related activity. Travel for rental vehicles. This must be in your approved budget. A collision waiver insurance is eligible, and the travel rental vehicles must be used to conduct grant-related program activities only. Car rental tax is allowable, which is different than sales tax, which is not reimbursable. Bus transportation is allowed. Our top 3 frequently asked questions. Can I email my reimbursement request? Payment requests must be submitted via the Recreation Grants online system. If you need help with submitting that, please email your fiscal team member, and we can assist you with submitting your request. How often should I submit a reimbursement request? Payment requests should be submitted at least quarterly. We do that in an attempt to clear up any questions you have until waiting till the period of performance is over. How long does it take to process my reimbursement request? A rule of thumb is payments can take up to 30 days to process if we have all proper documentation. Final grant payment. Final reimbursement request is due no later than 45 days after the grant period. Expenses and activities must be completed during the grant period. Expenses incurred after the last programmatic activity will be questioned and potentially disallowed. Records retention policy is 3 years after the end date. Tips. Please refer to the program guidance and the fiscal payment guide. Submit reimbursement requests through Argo. Save as you go, as Mario stated. The system will time out. Periodically save your information. I know that a lot of reimbursement requests can get up to 35, 40, 50 reimbursement line items. So please, as you fill this out, remember to save. Make sure that your expenditure is part of your approved budget. If you have any doubt, ask us before you purchase. Submit all required documents to avoid delays. And as Jessica reiterated, you are encouraged to exhaust your grant award. At this time, this concludes my portion of the presentation, and we will be opening it up for a live question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daryl. This is Jessica and Rena, and if you're still with us, good for you. We're very glad you attended today's training. We hope you'll find it very helpful. For right now, we're going to go ahead and open it up for live Q&A questions. So again, there should be an icon. It's a little bubble with a question mark, and you're welcome to go ahead and submit some questions. We'll read them off for everyone and get some of your questions answered. We've got plenty of questions submitted so far, a couple in the queue. The first question I want to address, it says, where do we record that we have met the requirement to attend today? Rena, do you want to answer that?
The answer is we actually have an attendance log. As you signed in, we know who attended. If you are attending as a group, please let us know who else is in your group that maybe not be tied to your login. And then if one of your colleagues was not able to attend today, we are asking that they watch this webinar and then email either Jessica or myself once they've completed viewing it to let us know, and then we can check it out and we could check their name off. I will let you know that we won't be issuing grant agreements until we know that the attendance has been fulfilled. So it's a very important element of your participation.
Excellent. We have a unique question. It may not be the same situation for all grantees, but this grantee, as part of their program, are going to be cooking some indigenous foods, and will be need to making food purchases outside of a grocery store. Can you talk about what that process might look like if they're purchasing food outside of a grocery store?
For me, that would look like emailing Jessica or myself, depending on who your grant coordinator is, and just discussing that with us. And we can talk about that individual situation with you, or emailing.
Okay, let's see. When can we expect our signed grant agreement? We are not able to spend any grant funds per our agency until we have the signed grant agreement.
We are working on getting those out as quickly as possible. There's several steps. It's we need to set up your organization as a vendor. We need to set up a contract in our system as and then of course just the pieces that we need to pull together from the program aspect. So it does take a while. I can't unfortunately give you an exact date. I will tell you that usually it's a couple months from your grant award of March 1st. But again, we are working as quickly as we can to get those out. We do understand it's not easy on your side when we don't get them out quickly.
This question is about RFPs. Once an RFP is submitted to the fiscal staff and once it's reviewed, is a grantee able to revise or edit if needed?
Fiscal team wants to respond to that one.
I can help you with that if you want. Hi, everybody. This is Blake Powers, System Administrator. So the good news is there is a technical guide to reimbursements in the Argo resources. That would be in the awarded active projects area. And it walks you through every part of the reimbursement process, everything that could potentially happen. But to answer this question, this would be a scenario where a reimbursement is submitted and some aspect of the reimbursement is incomplete. Okay, Based on what's incomplete, that would determine what the next steps are. If there's minor amount of documentation missing and our auditors can continue with their audit, what they would likely do is change it to a status called additional info required. And in that status, you will have a couple of additional areas to upload documentation that verifies the expenses that you've submitted for reimbursement. Once you status change it back to the auditor, they could continue to stay in that loop with you until you provided all of the correct documentation. If you submit a reimbursement request that's highly deficient, it's missing several required fields and documentation uploads, what they would likely do is return it to the original status that it started in, which is called in process, and have you populate all of the required fields correctly. But at that point, most likely the auditor would reach out to you and give you some indication about what was missing. So that's a good question. That does happen quite a bit, particularly on your first reimbursement that you submit. And the hope would be that after you submit that first one, that you're going to get a better sense of what's required and how to fill one of these out so that number 2 would not be as difficult.
Thank you, Blake.
Another question, when today's webinar is saved to the website, where will I be able to find it? So I guess this would be referencing where in Argo.
I can answer that question too, y'all. So the resources tab in Argo, which you do not even need to log in to look at, for most of you that have used the system, the login page has a tab at the top left corner that says resources. Likewise, if you're ever logged into Argo, at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a link to the Argo 2020 resources. You can use either pathway to get there. Once you get there, okay, the items that have been recorded today will be on the Co-op Grant Program Resources page. Okay, that's one of the first few links available on the Resources tab. If you click there and you go to the bottom of the Co-op tab, you'll see the resources for awarded or active co-op projects, and you're going to see a grant management webinar recording, and then you'll see a link to the slideshow for this grant management workshop that you can have both of those materials when you review today's webinar.
Great questions, everyone.
I believe I heard we can actually start spending money on March 1st, 2026, even if we have not signed the agreement. Is this correct?
You are able to incur cost once you receive your grant award announcement, so March 1st, and all those can be reimbursed, assuming obviously that it's in your approved budget. So yes, the answer is yes.
Next question, how do we get access or an account in Argo?
Okay, well, I would say this. If you're just now asking that question, before we get to that, you need to be sure that you have included yourself in the appropriate places for the documentation that's been provided to your organization about your project contacts. Okay, so if you get that documentation and you're going to be a contact for the grant, and yet you do not have system access, you want to rectify that right away. So right now, though, I want to look up and make sure that the person that asked that question doesn't already have access, and they do. Some of you may have had an account created for you, or some of you may not have, and need to create one yourself. In the case that I'm looking at, the account was created, but nobody added it to any of the projects involved. So in that case, I would correct it. But the best answer I can give you is if you do not have an account in Argo and you want to request one, okay, on the Argo login page, there's a link that says new user. It's right under the login area. Once you click that link, you'll provide the required information. And then for the organization you wish to join, you need to select your organization from the drop-down list, okay? In this case, the person that submitted this question, I'm going to rectify this problem. It looks like someone from your organization added 2 accounts on March 4th, but they did not add you to the actual document. And they may have not provided you the login as well. So that would be a couple of barriers there why you can't access the project.
Thank you, Blake.
How do I know which auditor to contact? So if they have a question about their audit or reimbursements, who should they contact?
I can answer that question if you like. So if you submit a reimbursement request and it gets returned to you for any reason to provide more documentation, there's an area of the form where our auditors can type in what their name is and what their contact information is. That will merge into the email that's delivered to you that alerts you that you need to provide more documentation. Okay, so typically, let's say you submit a reimbursement and you have really missed the boat. If, let's say, Mario, who was presenting earlier, if Mario received that and it was assigned to him, he would populate the payment and say, you are missing the following documentation. I'm going to return this to you to resubmit. If you have questions, please contact me. And he put his email address and or phone number. And when he status changed it back to you, that text that he typed into the payment form would merge into the email, and you would then have your auditor that you need to contact individually should you have additional questions.
And if you just have a question, so it's not related to a reimbursement that you've submitted, you can always contact Marcy, and we've included her contact right there on the screen.
Okay, just waiting for any other last minute questions. Again, in the meantime, for our grantees, especially if you have questions very specific to your project, make sure you know who your assigned grant coordinator is. It's either Rena or Jessica, and we're happy to set up a meeting or some time with you to answer more individual questions about your grant. Just give it another minute or two. One last question. Are all of the communication emails only via Argo, or does it also come to our institution or entity emails?
Good question. If you are registered for the Argo system and you have provided an email address in your user profile when you signed up, which you did, you have to, the automated emails from the system will deliver to that email address. If you fail to receive those, you might be sure to look in your junk folder or your spam folder, because your organization may have certain rules about what email they filter out and put into those folders. Okay, so if you feel like you're not receiving the emails, the first thing to do would be to check the spam and junk folders to make sure they're not there. At that point, if they're not there and you believe you should have received them, go ahead and reach out to your grant coordinator or myself, and we'll rectify the issue. Most likely at that point, the issue is that somebody has added you to the organization, but not to the project. So you're not getting any emails about the project when it changes statuses. Okay. Either way, though, we'll get to the bottom of it. That's a fairly common scenario, and we can rectify that. We want to be sure to rectify any scenario like that before the project gets to active status, though. Okay. Because once it does get to active status, the way that the system is going to communicate with you when, let's say, you have a quarterly report ready to go, is if you're joined to a project and a quarterly report is created for it on that certain day, it's going to email everybody joined to the project in the role of sponsor administrator and sponsor staff that you have a quarterly report to complete. Go ahead and log in and do so, right? So if you don't get any emails that you feel you should get, either there hasn't been any activity that's happening on the grant which would merit an email yet, or the emails happened before you got added to the project, or you're not added at all. But either way, we'll track down the scenario.
Okay, next question. How do we know who is our grant coordinator? Well, you should have gotten a welcome email from your grant coordinator. It had all of the steps necessary for your grant agreement that we needed you to fill out. So double check your email. It's either Rena or myself. Insider tip would be, if your organization starts with the letter A through G, you've probably been assigned to Jessica Lagallo as your grant coordinator. And if your organization is later in the alphabet through Z, you've been assigned to Rena. So it's It's not a super secret process. We just simply divide them up by the alphabet. So if you're in the first half of the alphabet, you've probably been assigned to Jessica. Second half of the alphabet, you've probably been assigned to Rena. Drop either one of us a line, and either one of us are happy to get you to the right person. All right. And we changed the email for correspondence. So you uploaded a project contact form. This is really critical, as this is what we base a lot of our communication with. So on there, you listed who your primary fiscal contact is. That's who our auditors are going to be reaching out to if they have questions. You also listed your primary program contact. That's important. And then your primary grant contact. So of those three, if you need to change one of those, we can get you a new form. This is very important right now because the names you supplied on that form are the names that go in your grant agreement. So if you've had to change this early on at this point, we need to know as soon as possible, because we can't get your grant agreement out. What would happen is we'd issue your grant agreement and it would not have the correct names on it. So Blake wants to add something there.
Yes, one thing I would like to tell you though is, so there are two parts to this question. Number one, there is the logistical, real world, pragmatic part of making sure that your grant team understands who your project contacts are, who they should reach out to. That's number one. But number two, let's say the projects all remain the same, and 2 months from now, some IT person like me rolls into your office and said, all our email addresses are changing, and you need to change your email address that's associated with your account. The answer is yes, you can do that, okay? The way that you would do that is you would log into the Argo system, and once your home screen loads, on the top right-hand portion of the home screen, there's a link that says profile. That's your user profile, okay? And in the user profile, there's an area where you can update your first name, your last name, your title, and then your email address, okay? That's where you would make a change to your email address. The system will then use that email address to send any future correspondence to you that comes directly from the automated emails, okay? Now, that being said, if you have a change in your email address and you're doing personal emails with Rena and Jessica, it might be a good idea to let them know so that they could update that in their Outlook contacts if they happen to be emailing you one-on-one. So hopefully that covers both parts of that question.
Okay, last call for questions, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for the day. Again, we are very excited as a team to work and support you over the next 18 months with your co-op grant. And we want to thank you for attending today's training. I think that's it for the questions. So we'll go ahead and signing off.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to working with you.